Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave's Flash Talk on Andor Season 1, which I think we're all going to agree to varying degrees is amazing. Zero Force, zero Skywalkers, zero aliens, more or less, maximum politics, maximum character, maximum nuance. Heavily influenced, I think, by Chernobyl, Blade Runner, and Brazil. The topic of the show, what price doing the right thing. It's epic TV. My name is Bina 007. I am your host today. As you can tell, I'm a little bit hyped about this show. Joining me are Michal.
Hello, Ink as Rain on the Discord place.
Vali.
Harley on the forums.
Zach.
Hello, Alias on Internet Things.
Adam.
Hey, this is Adam, aka Drowned Snow.
And Jock. Not to mention our own cute droid, Craig. Why don't we all start off with you all giving me just a little bit of how deep you feel in the lore? Like, are you someone who has watched simply everything on Disney Plus? And what your, well, maybe not lemon cake ratings out of 5, maybe your Imperial Star Paths out of 5. So let's go in the same order. Let's start off with Michal.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with almost everything. I have not watched The Bad Batch because I still haven't watched The Clone Wars. But I have watched Mandalorian. Unfortunately, I watched Book of Boba Fett. I watched Obi-Wan and I liked it. Sorry. But
Me too.
Yeah, it was fine. It was not that bad.
Fine. It was fine.
Yeah. But this is definitely on another level as far as like accessible, like skillfully made television goes. And like, I don't think that all Star Wars should be like this. I don't, whatever. I have some real beefs with this show, but artistically it's hard to argue with. It's just, It's beautifully done. The acting is incredible. It's one of those shows where it's a face watch show where you have to pay attention to what people's expressions are doing. The dialogue is, I hate watching it because I'll never write anything this good.
You will, but I've watched shit you've written on Netflix, by the way. So that's just like not true. People, I don't know if the listeners realize this, but Michal's like a real life writer for TV shows. Or TV show, soon to be shows. It's amazing. Anyway, carry on.
Thank you. My main complaint, and I'll probably get into this later, is just that I think it is ultimately emotionally very chilly. But I think it's a really good show, and kudos to the whole crew for, like, at least from my perspective, this was the show that like nobody was paying that much attention to. It was like, okay, I guess we're getting an Andor show too. And then, yeah, good for them for coming out swinging.
So if I had to pin your colours to the mast, how many Imperial Star Paths out of 5?
4.75.
Ooh, Vali Movali. Where are we on this show?
I'll give it 4.75 as well. I had an issue with the pacing. I feel like they try to cram too much into one season. Like, there's a big heist, there's a big jailbreak, and all these things kind of could have been their own thing or could have been left out, I think. But overall, like you said, there's no Jedi, there's no Sith really. It's just normal people doing normal shit. Well, not normal, but, yeah, it was really good. And I like these kind of human stories coming out of the Star Wars universe.
I concur. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I followed all the Disney Plus stuff so far. I think same sentiment as a lot of people. Like Book of Boba Fett, maybe a little unfortunate at times. But I really enjoyed this, and again, I was also not really looking forward to this, wondering why we were having this show. But the fact that they put, I think it was the first 3 episodes out as the premiere, which I think is like something that these shows should be doing more. Because the first episode or 2 was like, man, this looks cool, but what's going on? It took a while to catch you, and I think unfortunately that lost a lot of people that started the show. But I'd give it like a I don't know, 4 ways out of 5, even though there's only one way out. It was just, it just continually surprised me. There were issues with pacing, but the world building looked great, the acting, the writing. It was just not something I was expecting to drop like this.
Are you podcasting right now from an underwater Imperial prison? It definitely sounds like that.
Yeah,
cool. Zach, how about you? How far have you been keeping up, and how many Imperial Star Paths do you give this?
Yeah, with regard to that first question, I think I've watched everything that Disney has put out for Star Wars. Like, not like maybe like the like extra stuff, but like all the main pieces that they've put out. I've watched all that. I've had like kind of a bit of a struggle, honestly, with the Disney era of Star Wars things. Like it's been very up and down for me, and I just haven't really felt the same love for it as I did when I was a kid. And a lot of that's probably just me and like me getting older and my taste changing. But this show really made me feel things again. I guess I would say like it's the kind of story where like it's hard to describe it, but it's like the kind of story that really like struck me in a real way and just really worked for me. So for that reason, I would give it 5. I would give it 5-star paths. I do have issues with it, but I just really had a good time with it, and I thought it was just a really strong return to form. But like Michal said, like I don't think every Star Wars needs to be like this. I just think every Star Wars should have this level of confidence in what it's trying to do. Like I think that's the key.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I love it. The conviction, the sheer conviction around what it was doing was palpable. Jock, don't know if you can unmute and give us your thoughts.
I do think it's quite funny, like Disney creating a story which is basically encouraging people to do an arms revolt. But also, my question whether or not this would be considered Star Wars, since how important like the monomyth structure is to the Star Wars stories, and how much this show seems to subvert that.
Oh, I think it's definitely Star Wars, right? I mean, it's all the tech, all the story building, the big thing about fighting the Empire. To me, it's 100% Star Wars.
I actually think this story actually does kind of use the monomyth, but in a kind of like inverted way, where like I truly think that like Cassian Andor as a character kind of does follow a similar path to like Luke Skywalker. It's just that it's not as a simple, clear path. Like I think fundamentally the kind of character he is similar in that he is like a lost boy in a world that's trying to grind him down to dust and make him nothing, and he is trying to find purpose in that system, and he does eventually. And I think it also connects him well to another character who I also feel that way about, which is Jyn Erso, who doesn't get nearly this much development, unfortunately. But I feel that it connects him more to her kind of arc in that as well, which I enjoyed.
She does in the novels, but I did feel at one point the whole of this season was the equivalent of Luke Skywalker's line, but I wanted to go to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. I don't have time for this. So it is that journey to offering yourself up to the rebellion, which people take more or less time over.
I was going to say, it reminds me a little more of a Han kind of character where he comes out and begins from nefarious means and ends up being a hero. That kind of story arc, rather than Luke, like as you said, he's just a kid that develops that hero's journey.
Or even Lando, my favorite character. Michal?
I think you can also see the villains, like from their perspectives, being on kind of buildings, Romans, monomyth type journeys. Like Cyril Karn absolutely thinks he is like the hero of the galaxy. I think Dedra also does. I think everyone, I mean, the way Kino is introduced with like his whole identity being like winning this game and like that, his journey to that. Like, I think one of the reasons the show is so good is because you have all these people who are clearly on their own track in the galaxy and their own story and think that they are the star. Whereas I think in slightly simpler storytelling, which is not a bad thing, just a thing, to some extent skarsgård act in support of the main character, the person is the main character. I mean, every single person from Skarsgård on down are like Cassian Andor is a minor character in my life, and they're all the heroes of their own stories, with the exception of San, who's very much the hero of his mother's journey. God, yeah.
Do you think that's trying to build up to like the creation of the Rebel Alliance, like having all these different actors trying to believe their way is correct, and then eventually they kind of fall into line under a general leadership?
Or don't, in the case of Saw Gerrera, and I think that was one of the more fascinating characters in novelizations. What happens when it goes wrong, when you become, for the right reasons, but become as extremist and ideological as your foe? And I think, Luthen in his final monologue gets a little bit to that. But we're jumping ahead. Did everyone give their ratings? My rating is also 4.75. I loved it once I got into it, but as Adam said, I was one of the people who got lost after the first 2 episodes. And I only came back into it when you all kept telling me how good it was on the Discord. So thank you for that, because I just found it really, really, really dull. So the way I thought we could potentially tackle this today is Tony Gilroy, who is the writer-director behind things like Michael Clayton, was brought in to take this over from the showrunner. the way he describes it is you should watch it in batches of 3 episodes. So maybe just do a little summary of action, then discuss maybe the themes and the character development within those, if that's okay with everyone.
Let's do this Empire style. Let's have organization.
Yeah, you're our captain. You guide us. You have the Navet computer.
Oh dear, this is very much casting me as a baddie. But there we go. There are no baddies. There are only people on their own journeys. I'm very much the hero of my own journey. Episodes 1 to 3, leaving Canary and Ferrix. So we get flashbacks to a young child, Cassian, who then is known as Cassa, and his sister, subject to an Imperial mining raid on Canary, which only Cassian survives, rescued by his badass adoptive mama Marva and her husband. We then go to years later, and apparently 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, and that's like a ADBC thing now, apparently, in the Star Wars universe. Andor shoots 2 Imperial officers while trying to find his lost sister in a brothel. Oh my god, people have sex in this universe, and exploitative sex.
Oh my
Amazing.
god, I was like, this show starts in a brothel? Like, what am I watching?
I think this is very much Tony Gilroy making a statement of intention, right? This isn't your childhood Star Wars. Buckle up, boys. Andor then flees back to Ferrix, his home planet, and gets his best mate Brasso to cover up, which was hilarious. He also gets his mate / love interest Bix to get him a connect, because he needs to get his stolen Imperial Starpath off planet. But her jealous boyfriend Tim shops him security. Tim will get his in due course. Our security, led by Cyril Khan, he is not happy with the cover-up of what went down and shows up on Ferrix to investigate. He is like a dog with a bone. And then Cassian, at the end of this block of 3, meets Luthen, the mysterious Luthen, played by Stellan Skarsgård, to sell his Imperial widget, but is actually recruited to join, if not straight up the Rebel Alliance, then to go as a mercenary on a rebellious mission. And after a shootout, they escape. So basically, this is all about getting the backstory to Cassian and also getting him off Ferrix and into the path of Luthen and rebellious act. So maybe, do we want to talk about maybe pacing? Do we want to talk about Canary, the decision not to have subtitles, and how you feel about Ferrix in general? Is this the segment that people had the issue with pacing with, or was it all the way through that it was go slow, speed up, go slow, speed up? It's a little bit how it felt to me.
I just don't think we need to build up to see how bad the Empire gets. I think it's kind of redundant. Like, we see the end product. Okay, so they trash planets. We kind of saw that in Rogue One with the prison planet there. And I just have like a big problem with it because it even goes into the second act when they're doing the big heist. They know the Empire's evil, like, and everyone knows that. So I don't know why they spend so much time.
Yeah,
I do agree with people that have said that like it took us a while to get going here on these first 3 episodes. Like, I do appreciate the need to like establish Ferrix, and like I do personally love Ferrix as a setting, as a specific, very well fleshed out place.
Well, they built it, right? 2 blocks by 4. I mean, they built that whole set.
Yeah, that's and there's so much like custom and culture that comes from that, which is awesome. But I do think like there was just a lot of like going around, talking to people, going back to talk to other people. Like, it just felt like, all right, where are we going with this? Like, I eventually, it eventually pays off, and like I eventually felt like I had a sense of Andor and what he's trying to do. And that last episode, of course, is like such a like explosion of tension that is really compelling, and that's really, I think, where most people probably will get sold on continuing to watch the show with that. But yeah, it definitely, like, I was definitely like, what is happening here? Like, is this really going to be that good? With the first couple episodes, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's only by the end when you get that very moving, or hopefully very moving, speech from Marva that you really see some of the payoff, and that it was worth spending this time in Ferrix. But even then, I felt the first 3 episodes could have been done in an episode were it not for the flashback.
I honestly agree. Yeah.
The corporate security thing was kind of a weird angle. It was just very much like, where are we? What's happening next? I don't mind setting up our kind of villains as being like, well, I'm just all about order and trying to, trying to make a better life for people, sort of. But I don't know. It was not. It felt foreign, at least the first episode or 2.
The only thing I quite liked about this idea of outsourced private security is that we live in a world where so many of our wars are outsourced to private armies and private security, that I felt there was something strangely contemporary about having, the Wagner Group operate the security.
Well, if I could just say about the pacing, I think I started a little later, so I was kind of pre-warned that it started slow. So I think it didn't stand out for me as much because I was like, I knew. I mean, not to be like the unenjoyable part was intentional artistically, but like I do think that there's a certain amount of banality that is like coming across in this, like Cyril Karn and his like stupid contract job. Like the Empire isn't even doing their own dirty work. Like Cassian he's not doing any great heists. He doesn't have a dramatic rescue of his sister. He like gets caught up in something stupid and then like stupid stuff happens after, like it's very, very unglamorous. It is very like kind of pace of life. And I do sort of feel like you wouldn't necessarily get quite the impact that the final episode has if you hadn't been on Ferrix, kind of just living there, like seeing the tea shop, seeing the guy, seeing who Bix goes for the transmitter. Like that pace of life, I think, is kind of important in getting to where we get.
Because they're the only real people we get to know, basically, the ordinary victims of Imperial life.
Mm-hmm.
And because actually they're not under full Imperial control at the start. That only happens when Cassian fucks shit up. So you see the mission creep. You see how something that's just private sector bureaucracy gets rolled slowly into full-on Imperial force, which incidentally is how the British took over India, right? It starts off with private company men, so to say, who then become Imperial forces when something goes wrong. This feels to me so rooted in history. And this idea of banality, I feel, the banality of evil, to use the cliche or the title of the book, I think really comes back when you see Sun then go into that Imperial bookkeeping office and statistics office. Behind this empire is an empire of bureaucracy and stats. And this is what evil looks like. This is what control looks like ultimately.
That's a consistent theme throughout the whole show. Yeah, you guys are both making excellent points and really do justify why it starts the way it does. But yeah, like that is basically what Marva says at the end, right? Where like the empire essentially lulls you to sleep. With how just like slowly and insidiously it takes control.
Yeah, and then you wake up one day and realize you're living in fascism.
That's what Luthen says, right? Like we need people to feel like they're choking, not just that they occasionally can't breathe and then they can take a deep breath once the Empire goes away.
Yeah, just sort of the frog in the pot of boiling water.
Yeah, and even like reacting to like an outrageous tweet by like a world leader would be one thing, but when they come like day after day, you're just like you can't process it, so you just kind of just it becomes background noise until like you said, you're the frog in the pot of water and all of a sudden you're boiling.
And in a way, we talked about the buildings are a man of all these different characters, whether Sark or Luthen or whoever, but there is kind of the character that is the people of Ferrix who start off asleep and not noticing, and then resist the resistance in a way, like are just pissed off with Cassian for bringing trouble to their door and want to turn away and just be quiet and have everything go away, and then finally aroused. I mean, that is the journey, really. That's kind of like the generic journey from people to rebellion. So actually, I think I'm talking myself more into liking this. But
one big theme I think that tied in with the Rise of Skywalker is just that like one line where it's like, who are these guys? I'm like, it's just people. Like people are just normal people are rising up against this, like, and just like the little things that they did, like Brasso tying the punter to that other structure that made it crash, like just little bits of sabotage that can show them.
That kind of like conversation between Brasso and Andor early on, where he's covering up for him, was just so brilliantly done.
I was just going to jump in about the flashback and say that I would love if anyone can convince me this part was valuable, because at this moment it feels very vestigial. Like it feels like it was part of a story they might have meant to tell, but they kind of dropped at some point, but just couldn't quite like fully cut away, because like it really hasn't paid off to anything, I don't think.
Maybe it will in the
so
second
season. Yeah, it might later. Yeah, I'm not sure. But
the only thing that I can think of is like this kind of underlying theme of like family and what family is, and that Marwa isn't necessarily his mother, but is his mother. Like, other than that, I don't want to. I agree. It could have been cut out. Like, he could have had that 1 second shot of him looking over like the desolate landscape and know that like this is the original planet he came from. Thank you.
Yeah, to me, it was. I have mixed feelings on it, but I do think that it's worth considering that part of it is there to suggest to us that like Marva's own grayness, because she's such a badass, but like she kidnaps him. She drugs him and she kidnaps him. I was literally watching this. I was like, that white lady just kidnapped a native child. And like, that element is there despite how like beautiful their relationship really is, and it just adds complexity to it.
I was super wondering whether the writers, when writing this, were inspired by that Thai cave rescue, where at the time they didn't tell anyone because they thought we'd all freak out, but the only way to get the boys out from the cave was basically to give them a general anesthetic, because if they moved or thrashed about, they'd die. And the risks of them dying were so high. So anyway, I just wondered if real life had intruded on that. My defense of the flashback, which I also thought was rather banal, and when I did a rewatch today, I did fast forward through all of it, was it was audacious to not have it subtitled, to not other it, which I thought was really interesting. And I think it's important because it shows Andor is always running. He's always not at home. He's a refugee, an immigrant, a kidnapped kid, however you want to put it. And that's important to his character, right? When you see him being ruthless, when you see him in Rogue One and how he develops, this idea that, yeah, he has this adoptive mum who he loves, but he is kind of homeless and shiftless, and he's always breaking in on the run. But again, I felt that could have been done with one flashback. It did not need 3 or whatever, how many we got. So
I concur.
Okay, anything else on this first section? What else is there to say? Well, maybe that's it. I don't know. It looks flipping good.
I'll just say that, like, as soon as Stellan Skarsgård showed up, I got excited. Like, as soon as I saw him appear, I was like, oh yeah, we're going now.
Yeah, it's like we all got excited when the Mando turned up in Boba Fett, right? I mean, this is just continuing the tradition of Star Wars, where the person named above the title card is not really the person who's the protagonist that we're interested in. So this to me is very much Luthen's story with a side order of Mon Mothma and maybe Vel. And like Andor is about the 5th character I'm actually interested in this show. Okay, so on to episodes 4 to 6, which I have called the Eldani Raid, which is very much, I think, a discrete sort of mini story within a story. So Cassian is now renamed from Cassa to Cassian to Clem. Luthen takes him and makes him join a rebel group that's about to steal a massive Imperial payroll. Luthen brings Vel into the plot. She's the leader. She kind of has to vouch for him. The rest of the crew is a bit mistrustful, especially Skeen, who will always be Desi from Girls to me, which means I mistrust him. They are aided on the inside by Lieutenant Gorn. They're timing the raid to coincide with a big religious event, which means the base won't be well guarded. Poor Lieutenant Gorn dies in the raid, as do most of the rebels. Afterwards, Skeen suggests that he and Andor split the loot, but Andor kills him. He leaves with his payment, but Vel gives him the dead Nemik's manifesto, according to Nemik's dying wish, which was rather moving. Meanwhile, back on Coruscant, Luther, we realise in day life, is masquerading as an antiques dealer, and we meet Mon Mothma, yay, who is secretly funding the rebellion, but it's now getting much harder to move money around, and she's worried people are going to realise she's raiding the family money. She also clearly does not love her husband. She also lives in, Architectural Digest, beautiful, like Art Deco, come Japanese styly Imperial household. I would definitely live there. Meanwhile, Cyril Khan has been sacked and is living with his mum, who clearly has Asian/Jewish overtones. We can get into that. But she calls in a favor from the uncle, which is so Asian, and gets him a job in the Imperial Statistics Bureau. But he is still obsessed with Andor. Meanwhile, back at the Imperial Security Bureau, Supervisor Miro realizes that an incipient rebellion is forming. It's too random to be actually random. And this is proved to her by the Eldani raid. So lots going on, including Coruscant. Where to begin? Should we start with our rogue band of rebels about to attack the Imperial payroll?
Can I suggest that this is probably some of the best world building in Star Wars that there's been?
You may indeed suggest that.
Eldani, the eye, the whole like setup. Like I think typically Star Wars just kind of insists upon itself that like, oh, we're going to an alien planet, so like things are going to look different. But here we really get a backstory, and then like the actual visuals of the eye were just amazing.
What are you trying to say? That the Gungans wasn't a lovely experience?
It's brilliant. Yeah, everything is poetry. It rhymes. This is by far my favorite set of episodes of the show so far. Like this 3 through 6 run was, to me, incredible. Like every aspect of it I thought was amazing. Of course, everything Marley said about the world building, the setup for this planet, and just the situation was really just well done, I thought. And to me also, like, all of the characters like really leapt off the screen for me in a way I did not expect, or I just don't normally like experience in like anything. Like, and maybe I just had a really positive response to it, but like just all the characters like Vel, Cinta, Skeen, like and especially Nemec. Like Nemec is such a good example of like this young, like over earnest, just like good dude who is not going to make it in this world. Like I just loved everything about all those relationships.
Not going to make it, because in deference to Mama Wolf, Nadia, who always rails against people not wearing helmets, if you're on an undercover mission in a sort of semi-rural landscape and you're all wearing combat fatigues, why the heck have you got a red hat on?
Not a good idea, maybe. But it's his look.
Yeah.
He's got a drip. But yeah, like everything about it, and of course we can get to the eye and just like the absolute masterpiece of a like payoff and structured set piece that is that whole sequence. But yeah, it just, I don't know, I just fell in love with the show with this sequence.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think if you get to this point, you're hooked, because it's just masterful.
So I think the characters are really good. And I think I agree with the world building, and it shows kind of another element of like how to do good world building, because I actually really like just throw you in the deep end and don't explain anything kind of world building. I think that can be very organic sometimes, but having Cassian, like posing him as somebody who needs to learn the specifics of this world for the mission to work also works really well, and does give us that extra layer of understanding. Also, we get that from the Imperials, you know, like that guy called them like the Donnies or something, like stupid. It was very good. But this set of episodes kind of started to highlight my issue with the coldness of the show, which is that, like, thinking back on it, like the Aldani crew has been working together for months, right? Like they are in very stressful situations, but like there seems to be no camaraderie whatsoever. Like Vel and Cinta are sleeping together, but they don't particularly seem to like each other. Like nobody has. That's like fair. The warmth, I thought, was really lacking, and the warmth and camaraderie of disparate people working together is something that I love about Star Wars. So for me, this was kind of the beginning of highlighting that absence.
So to me, that was deliberate, intentional, and more true to life, because they're all holding something back, and you get that more clearly when you realize that Vel, far from running around, you know, in the scrublands planning, is really an incredibly rich trust fund kid, effectively, which presumably she is holding back in some respect from the others. So they can't give of themselves completely, right?
The one dude was a old stormtrooper, and he couldn't tell that to one of the girls because the stormtroopers like slaughtered her whole family or whatever. There's all these walls built up in what should be like a cohesive team. And again, I think that's just kind of everyone being the hero of their own story before they really get behind like this alliance that brings them all under the same banner.
And it's the sacrifice that Luthen speaks of. Like, you don't have camaraderie, you don't have closeness, the only person you can trust is yourself.
I mean, I can definitely accept that argument. I guess it's just, if we talk about things that make things feel like Star Wars for us, that was something that I mean, I feel like it's in every Star Wars thing almost, except this. And like,
yeah, that's true.
That's fine. Like obviously, I almost would imagine the show as like more on the sci-fi end of, if you think of Star Wars as kind of more fantasy based, because it is more about ideas than people. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a huge flaw. It was just something that I felt was.
Yeah, you're right to note it, isn't it? Because Star Wars is more clubbable. And even Rogue One has that, right? So something this is meant to be the prequel to that. Where I found that, I think, was more in the Prison Break, that actually, yes, in the end, I felt that pull between Andor and the Andy Serkis character very strongly. Okay, that felt a bit like some of those British World War II films, like, you know, Bridge Over the River Kwai, whatever, you know, this ramshackle bunch of prisoners going to come together and stage a breakout, which I really liked. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right here. It is unusual. This is a much colder, much more adult, much more cynical in some ways Star Wars than we've ever seen. It's much more like Battlestar Galactica or The Wire in that respect.
I will say that when I saw these episodes, I didn't realize how long the season was going to be. So I thought like, oh, maybe this is like the show. Maybe this is going to be like the finale. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, there's like over 10 episodes. What?
Is it wild that like some episodes were like 35 minutes and some were an hour?
Oh, that's streaming. The freedom that streaming
There are
brings.
no rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
So maybe should we go to Coruscant, where Luthen is now a debonair antiques dealer, dealing with our lovely Mon Mothma, who's back. She's been cast in all of the modern Mon Mothma roles, secretly funding the rebellion. Her husband, Solarius Perrin, apparently he's a gambling person, definitely. It's an arranged marriage, we'll come to find. Thoughts on Mon Mothma? Is this the first time we've truly seen her in her day-to-day life as an as a senator?
I love her. I love her so much.
I love her too.
This was like the courtly side of the show, and like the way her dialogue is always so elliptical and so formal and so like, and her whole life is like framed as like in this incredibly gorgeous cage, where she can't talk to anybody. I loved it so much. I've always kind of had a soft spot for Mon Mothma based on almost nothing, because there is almost nothing. But I thought this was so worthy of her as like an early political actor who fully believes in the cause and then finds that the price is way higher than she thought. I thought it was beautiful.
I want her clothes. I want her hairstyle. Yes. I want her house. I want her car.
Not her husband.
Well, no, but I'd divorce him and get a new one. But I want everything about that house. That house is just with those beautiful cherry blossom trees through it. Oh my God. This was like Star Wars Architectural Digest porn for the first time ever, and I'm here for it. More of that, please. I have nothing else to say other than it's awesome. And also kudos to Stellan Skarsgård, right? Who can go from being Luthen to being the kind of smarmy art dealer within a sentence, depending on who's looking. He's such a great actor.
With the worst wig.
Yeah, it's so bad. Kudos to Luthen as well. He's a great actor as well.
Did you guys read any articles about the shit that's in the stores? Like, there's a Gungan shield in the background. There's one of the Jedi's face masks that dies in Order 66. And someone said that they saw Indiana Jones's whip in the background as like a little nod to George Lucas and Spielberg.
Lot of good in-jokes.
Now I'm intrigued.
Insofar as there was fan service, that's where they put it, which is the appropriate amount of attention fan service should get.
My only reaction to all that was like, why isn't the Empire cracking down more on like Jedi artifact distribution? Like, why haven't they checked in on this? But I don't know. Maybe they don't care.
Was there any significance to him having that Kyber crystal pendant and giving it to? Oh,
he's a Jedi, right? Like, everything he said he had to give up and go underground. He's a Jedi.
There is a lot of stuff that could point to that, but I don't think it's a given at this point. But
I did not get, apart from that little final fight scene that we'll get to, the aerial fight scene, I didn't get any Jedi-ness from him, but I felt they were giving us enough that if you wanted to take it that way, you could, but...
Yeah.
So this takes place 5 years before Rogue One, so effectively 5 years before A New Hope. He said that 15 years ago he gave up everything, and that would put it at Revenge of the Sith. And Kyber crystals are like tied to the Jedi and Sith, so that's where I thought.
Oh, okay.
Especially, at first I thought he was a Sith because. At first I thought he was a Sith because he's like, the whole point is to cause suffering. Like, that's what we want to do. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound cool. But then, his final speech, I was like, oh, he's a Jedi.
Huh.
Well, I think for me, I don't need him to be a Jedi, and I'd probably rather, honestly, he's not, just because it's kind of interesting to operate all this without that being involved. But at the same time, I do think if he was, it could be compelling in so much as he is like the Jedi who is like totally pragmatic and ruthless, like not a Sith. Like he actually has like a Jedi's like, I don't know, like focus and determination to something, but his ideals are just completely warped. Like, I don't know, but he's still like fully committed to them in the way a Jedi would be. So like it kind of works in this weird sort of like not Sith, but I don't know,
he's just like Jamming, right?
Ruthless Jedi thing that I think is cool.
I really want him to not be a Jedi.
I am torn because I think it's a really delicate line to walk as far as what this show is and whatever. However, I do think that there is something quite appealing about the idea. A lot of recent Star Wars has kind of gone after the Jedi for their extreme, no feelings, no connections, blah, blah, blah. And that's what Luthen says, right? Like, he's made his mind a sunless place. He burns his decency for other people. And it's like, isn't that kind of what the Jedi theoretically were for? But he is doing good, right? The top line capital G, good, but he's doing so much bad along the way that like
I
would
don't
find
think
it really
Jedi would. I don't think Jedi of the Obi-Wan Kenobi school would allow a scout sort of raid that they knew had been found out by the Imperials to get shot down and taken deliberately to throw them off the scent. That's very un-Jedi-ish behavior.
But I think it's using the Jedi
would clearly
philosophy
change
and
that.
warping it.
Oh, okay. Oh, please. Oh, God.
I feel you. I totally feel you. I think it's yeah.
Yeah,
Go
like
back
I
and
ultimately agree with you, Bina, but at the same time, I'm like this idea percolating of this, like, this like deconstructed Jedi is also kind of cool to me.
She has that cane.
it could
that
go
kinda
either way,
looks like
and be
a
cool.
lightsaber.
You know what it really reminds me of now? For people who've read John le Carré, which you all know I hold dear to my heart, he has a character called George Smiley, who is a very senior British spy. He has to come in and clear up after moles have taken over. And he's kind of like a jaded knight, maybe like a character in a Marlowe novel, right? So like a film noir, where he has these noble ideals, but he's also jaded by the real world. And the whole big speech, we'll get to it in the next section, really reminded me of him in Smiley's People. So if anyone's read Smiley's People, I think George Smiley is the inspiration for Luthen.
Have you watched Slow Horses?
Yeah, I was watching season 2 just now before we started this.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
very much
the
a
same
fan.
kind of character as Gary Oldman, right?
Absolutely, and that is very much written in the shadow of John le Carré and George Smiley. And I think that you can see, like, Tony Gilroy has talked about influences on this and said he started it out as a film noir. And film noir, you think of all those famous movies like Big Sleep, like the hero, the Humphrey Bogart hero, is always someone who's kind of like a fallen knight. We're in that tradition. Anyways, let's go on to Cyril Khan while Michal is still here. I'm curious, did you very much... Some people are saying this is anti-Semitic, the depiction of the mum. What are your feelings and thoughts? All of you, what are your feelings and thoughts? Because I had Asian mum vibes of this.
Yeah, I mean, the actress is a pretty famous character actress, I think. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I also kind of went into a place where I was like, I don't want to think about this.
Well, maybe it's unfair of me to ask you specifically as well.
No, it's totally cool. It's just I guess it certainly makes sense for him to have an overbearing mother. Like, the character more than justifies that in his existence. I could have maybe done with a few less like of the circular conversations that they go through, but you know,
There's
I
a lot
didn't...
of blue milk cereal, like a
lot.
It reminded me a lot of 2001, like the design of the domestic living quarters and stuff. I thought was very, very referential to sort of 1970s sci-fi, and even with the costume she wears and those browns and oranges in her hair. Like, I feel for like real 1970s sci-fi fans, there's a lot of material here, like visually referential material.
Yeah, very Beehive, very, yeah. Not my favorite part of it, but I did think it served the character.
Like, this is quite a difficult thing they're trying to do, I think, where, like, I mean, Cyril, like, essentially is, like, an incel kind of character, right, in terms of how, like, he is portrayed. Like, that's just what he is, right? Like, he's just this guy who is, like, in the world, he has been sort of ostracized, and he's trying to, like, in this very, very fucked up way, trying to, like, find his own place, like, be the hero of his own story, and it, like, becomes this attachment to Dedra, which is really weird and uncomfortable. Like, this is not the kind of character you typically would portray, but it is a character or a kind of person that exists. So, like,
in real life, he's going to become a serial killer, right? They all have these overbearing mothers, and
like, I don't want to speak too much on like how much those like coded things like mean in real world, but yeah, like it's tricky. Like I'm still waiting to see if they can really make this character pay off in a way that like we're all like on board for. I don't know. It's a tough character.
But it is great because through him you get to see what being a menial low-level grunt in the Empire means. And the scene where they go into that statistics bureau is so Terry Gilliam's Brazil, the sort of Kafkaesque bureaucracy, and you know, evil is done by lots of low-level functionaries just doing their job, quote unquote, capital D, capital T, capital J, and slash, you know, early Matrix, pre-Blue Red Pill. I mean, it's beautifully done visually and darkly comic, like really darkly comic. Like, some people think Weights and Measures is like the hot place to be, but I really like that scene. It spoke to the sort of Terry Gilliam in me, I think.
Also sending serious Severance vibes, if anyone has watched that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Just the name of the place, the Bureau of Standards, is like it perfectly captures all that stuff.
Yeah, very 1984, very Orwellian. Which brings us also to the beautifully designed Imperial Security Bureau, the ISB, and its white beehive with its white outfits. Interestingly, the bit where the entrance to that is shot just outside the tube station where I go to work. So there you go.
Oh,
My main thought about the ISB was honestly like, I bet they have the best bathrooms.
What, spotlessly white?
You can
But
poop
is that
anywhere.
the best bathroom? Like, I don't know.
Yes.
That'd
I mean,
make
they're
me
probably filming
uncomfortable.
you at the same time.
Exactly. Like, I wouldn't be at peace, which I feel is very important in a bathroom.
I feel like sanitary is the most, like germ-free is the most important thing in bathroom. I feel I would be very at home in the ISB, which is not a good thing.
I mean, it's so cool to see the ISB in this much depth because they really like are the driving force of the Empire in terms of like the movers and shakers of what everything they're doing, and you really see that clearly here. Like they're really the operational standard of all the fucked up shit they do. So.
Yeah, and big up
Very well
to
done.
Maester Kai Byrne, actor Anthony
Yeah.
Lester, who I love as a character actor.
He's
back in here, just doing a great job playing people off against each other.
My thing is, I thought he was Uncle Harlow, who I don't think is ever identified, but he might not be.
And my thing was, isn't he just playing the same character he plays on Endeavor?
Haven't seen Endeavor.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, but maybe.
Just like the police chief.
So anything else on this section? I have to say, this was my favorite, well, partly my favorite section, but not for the Aldani raid actually, but for the Coruscant thing. I think what brings me to this show and makes me love it is all of this kind of how the Empire is truly operating stuff. But I was so in. By the time you get to this stuff, I'm very, very in.
And this was really well done in terms of the restraint of it. Like you feel the looming shadow of like Palpatine and stuff like that, where like he's like briefly mentioned, or like we have to make sure things work out for the Emperor, and he's just like hanging over all this, but we never actually see him. I thought that was a really good
which is so cool.
Yeah, sorry, my friend sent me a meme that was like, isn't it crazy that all these like professional, militant, bureaucratic people at the ISB are like working for the guy with like the Play-Doh face and the lightning fingers and like whatever.
Unlimited power.
Okay. And I was like, you know what? Yes, but I feel like that is such a commentary on fascism, where like the core of it is always absurd. Hitler was right. He thought he believed in like ancient civilization aliens and all that bullshit. Like,
yeah, they're just
they're all nutters. I think that's just a self-propelled desire to follow orders and do right, and do right as they define it. It's almost like there's obviously a very contentious argument with Hitler about how far did he direct down and how far did people sort of reach up to him and do things they thought he would approve of, right? But I think there is an element of that here where you see people ordinary people, it almost wouldn't matter who the figurehead is. They like law and order. They like to feel part of something and in control and on top of other people, and they've got a power buzz. Michal, I know you've got to go in 5 minutes. Do you have stuff to say about the back six before you go, or any themes, things you had issues with, things you loved?
I really think that the way they handled Dedra was very, very skillful, because like you are kind of rooting for her in the first couple episodes because she's this underdog at the ISB and like everybody's being mean to her, and it's like she's obviously so competent. Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, oh no, be worse at your job. Please be overlooked.
He likes torturing people.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, I thought that, and when you see the kind of climax of her arc where she just pulls off her skin and reveals the lizard beneath, like the torturer who frankly enjoys this kind of thing. Like when Bix is just like, I can't tell you anything that like you're not going, like you're gonna do it anyway, and she's like, yeah, you're probably right. That the torture was horrific and ingenious, and I mean, one of the images that like keeps sticking with me is Bix listening to Marva's funeral speech, and like she can't even hold her head up, but tears are just like dripping down her face, and it's just like, oh my god. I'm just spamming you with thoughts. Mama Mothma is amazing. I thought the plotline with her daughter was breathtaking and horrifying and gorgeous, and also an interesting commentary on how religion kind of plays into rising fascist movements and young people and all that. It's a good show. I did really like the prison arc. That felt almost like a familiar core of something that was almost easier to root for, like
that's back to Luke breaking out right at a very sort of simple, at a simple level. That's the Star Wars we know and love. That's the familiar Star Wars.
And I mean, at the control center, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. That literally was a very strong visual reference. I mean, I think your point about ripping off the lizard, you know, the face to reveal the lizard underneath, speaks to your point about how all these people at the top, there's a kind of crazy guy with a Plato face, the white face and the lightning coming out of his fingers. Because actually, it doesn't matter who that person at the top is to them. It's just that person at the top allows them to be who they truly are, which are sadistic, torturing fascists. And it almost doesn't matter. It's just whoever gives you permission to be that will get your undying, unwavering support. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I'm excited to see what's next. It's such a weird little different show, but I appreciate it. I appreciate you, Andor.
Well, I appreciate you coming onto the podcast. Thank you for coming on, even though you've got to zoom off. And we will proceed, but voyage well, and make the force be with you.
Thank you. You too. Bye, guys.
Bye, Michal. All right, folks, anything left on this section, or shall we move to episodes 7 to 9?
Get on program.
Okay, episodes 7 to 9, which I've called Fallout. So Mira is vindicated and sent to investigate Ferrix, having gotten information from Khan. She has Bix tortured and realizes Andor did the Aldani raid, but she doesn't quite still have the Luthen connect. She's still looking for the connecting person. Luther's assistant Clea instructs Vel and Zenta to find and kill Cassian, as he knows Luthen's identity, so showing how pragmatic and ruthless Luthen can be. We realise that Vel is actually Mon Mothma's cousin. Mon Mothma meets with Tay Colmer, an old friend and banker who you think might have had a thing for her back in the day. She asks him to help her access family funds and cover up the 400,000 credit deficit in the banking account. Cassian goes to Ferrix, but is blamed for the Imperial crackdown. His mum refuses to leave with him as she's joining the rebellion. So he goes to an Imperial version of Ibiza and is arrested for nothing, ironically, and sentenced to 6 years of hard labor. Again, ironically, the victim of the far more austere punishments that have come on the back of the Aldani raid. The prison is policed using shocks administered through the floor and enforced by prisoner guards like Kino Loy. Loy and Andor realize they may never be released alive and decide to rebel. Meanwhile, Luthen meets up with Saw Gerrera, which is cool, a younger, less fucked up version than we saw in Rogue One. Luthen wants him to work together with other rebels to raid the Imperial power station Spellhouse. Saw refuses, but the ISB, we've discovered, actually knows that there's going to be the raid on Spellhouse. So that is effectively what happens on 7 to 9, which is a lot of time spent in the prison, a lot more time under sort of realizing that the problem that Mon Mothma's in and going to take Helma. So, guys, shall we start with Mon Mothma and her monetary troubles? How do you guys feel about this?
I'm just wondering what she's funding so far, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of rebel activity, at least that we're made aware of.
Well, she's funding Luthen, so presumably all his bribes and all his information, all his spies, that's all being paid for by her.
Yeah, it's a big galaxy too.
I think, I do really enjoy the Mon Mothma storyline and just like all the stuff that you guys have talked about thus far. But I do think this is the point where it started to feel like, I don't know, for me, like started to feel very disconnected and slowed down. I do think this is all interesting. I do think the payoff is interesting where she does kind of have to sell her soul to fund the rebellion, which again is going to be really interesting to see like how that actually moves into like her actually taking up that role as a leader in that. But I don't know, just like it felt like we needed to like check in on Mon Mothma every week, and like not a lot was happening at this point for me. But yeah, that was
I mean, if the theme of the series is everyone realizing the sacrifice they're going to have to make, I guess we're edging her towards it, but it does take a while. Did you all feel that Tay was on the up and up, or do you think he? I think she just thought he was going to lend her the 400,000 credits, right? But he comes up with this really crude bargain. Do you think he's actually secretly working for that other guy? Do you think he's actually on Mon Mothma's side?
Yeah, like he definitely comes across as the lone good guy in a world of just like pure politics and pure selfish motivation, but that might just be the mask that we want to believe. And he, in fact, is actually the most pragmatic and sinister of the bunch. I'm not sure.
It's just
what is he referencing? Sorry.
There you go.
I was going to say, what is he referencing when he first talks to Mothma about his political beliefs might being maybe a little too hard for her to hear or something like that, if he's not like on board with the rebellion? Or do you think he's like a double agent kind of thing?
I don't know. I think it's ambiguous. I think Ben Davis, the actor who I really like, plays it very slippery. Like he seems sincere, but you never know. because he immediately goes to the most extreme solution, so to say, which we'll get to in the next section. But it just made me think, was he ever really truly trying to help her sort of cook the books? Or is he already in the pay of that other guy, because that other guy is so rich? Davos Skulden is so rich. Maybe Ted Kalmer was already in his pay. Thin pickings. I mean, I'm not saying, and not that I'm particularly.
No, I buy it. I think it's plausible for sure, especially with the path that he did lead this all on.
Okay, so let's get into the prison breaks. I guess that's not the prison break, but the pre-prison break. So we get poor Cassian sent off to prison. How do you find the look and feel of this?
Well, I immediately thought like Squid Game, just with like the colors. Like it felt
with
very
the orange. Yeah.
That's the immediate visual reference I had for what they're doing. And also the way the prison is structured is very game-like, right? Which, it's all with the purpose of breaking people down and creating divides and all that. But like the tables competing against each other and all that, and the punishment and the reward and stuff. So
that's so good. I wonder if they would have seen Squid Games while writing this, or whether they would have been made. I don't think so, actually, because I think this was filmed pre-pandemic.
I think you're right. Yeah, so it's just like a coincidence almost. I mean, there probably are like touchstones that both of those things used.
Well, like the increasing gamification, the influence of video games on everyday life. But you see that old guy on their table and you're like, oh, he's not going to make it, is he? But I love the idea of these kind of like these zappy floors. I thought that was genuinely new. And like Andor eyeing the rubber beats. I thought, like the prison, the prison breakout's so familiar. We even have one in Rogue One, but like this was genuinely kind of a cool new take on that. I thought.
And this is an instance where I feel the slow pacing really pays off, where like you feel the build up to the prison break, where it just feels so much more dramatic because you spent so much time getting to know how awful this place is. Like, I do think there's value in taking time to, for one thing, just like get to know the place, get to know the suffering, but also like to slowly turn Kino. Like that's really like the real like arc of this is like Kino slowly turning, like that moment where he's like in the second to last episode of this arc, he's like never more than 12 or whatever. With the thing, it's like such a like, oh shit, he is on board. This is exciting. And it just, the reason that hits so hard is because we had to really, really build to getting there.
Yeah, and also just realizing how good Andy Serkis is in live action roles.
Oh, he's great, yeah.
Such a good actor. And just actually before we get to the prison, the kind of the exchange between Cassian and the shore troopers when he's arrested, and I just thought this is what it must have felt to be some random kids on the streets of Afghanistan suddenly finding us off in Guantanamo on a complete humbug. Like what? Like the speed of arrest, and that was brutal. That was brilliant writing.
The pure injustice of it is so felt like, and it's very real, and that's why we feel it so strongly. It's a very real thing.
Yeah, very on the nose.
I do think that like the choice, I really enjoyed the choice of him going to the Ibiza like South Beach place, because I think it shows for me, for like casting, like what he wanted in the first 6 episodes was just money to have the freedom to try to like be a person, but he realizes here, and a lot of it's obviously out of his control, but like he doesn't seem very fulfilled with his 200,000 credits and all this. Like I think this shows that like this is really
and he's got a hot girlfriend and everything as Reed, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And I love the music. Music, Nicholas Bertal's done such a great job of the music, but like, it's always kind of slightly off kilter or off key or being distorted. But this kind of like really sort of metallic Ibiza type club music that just feels off key somehow. So good.
Yeah, this really confused me as far as timeline, because like you said, he has a new girlfriend. He's over, at a warm, easy place. Like he wanted to take Marva to. Like I don't know how much time had passed between those two scenes.
I think at some point someone says 2 months later.
Oh,
but I could be making that up.
And I thought we were going to see K2 or whatever his robot is in Rogue One.
We saw the robot, but not him.
Yes.
And maybe it's because I'm in Europe and the migrants coming over the sea is such a burning political issue. But it was like when the K2SOs or whatever they are kind of, beating up like seemingly sort of migrant people coming in off the beach. I was like, are they tourists who've got drunk, or are these people coming in off boats and they're getting beaten up? And I don't know. It just, there was so much resonance to contemporary politics in this bit. It was very scary to me and really dark.
Yeah, and I like how I think in Phantom Menace they tell Anakin that slavery was outlawed, but they still had forced labor like America does. So it's good to know that the Galactic Empire has a 13th Amendment too.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like makes you wonder why they even bothered with the clones, because they've got so much free just to arrest a bunch of people, right?
Yep.
Incredibly dark.
Yeah. I did like that aspect of it.
A lot of people are saying, well, not a lot of people are saying, The Hollywood Reporter, that's the only people I really read, are saying that maybe Andy Serkis will be nominated for an Emmy in sort of guest appearance because he's only in the 3 episodes.
Yeah,
which
for that.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
That would be cool. Yeah,
He was
for that
good.
category.
Like they're positing that this could be one of the few Star Wars or Disney shows that doesn't just get technical awards, but is actually nominated for like acting performances because it's so good. But then, Succession will be back and White Lotus will a whole bunch of stuff. So there won't be many slots left in the end of that. But you could definitely see that being worthy of it. Anything more on the Prison Break, boys and girls?
That's about it for me. I'm curious, do people have a take on the no aliens thing? Like there's no aliens in the prison and all that stuff. Like, I mean, they show up at the end. Too. Is that like an issue for you? I know this was like
I don't think so. I think it's just the imperial industrialization of workflow. Like you make these people man-sized, so they're humans, and you have another jail that's whatever other being.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and it's just like down to the ergonomics.
It's very Empire, yeah. Like just separate all the different.
Yeah.
Although I do wonder if there's a bit of snobbery on the part of the writers who think they're writing The Wire and don't want to have like funny aliens in it.
It also might be a budget thing, honestly. Like just having
that was my first thought. Was like it might just not be practical to really fill it with a bunch of aliens for a few shots.
Although, I mean, like the amount of money Disney has, but yeah,
they do have a lot of money. For sure.
All options above. Anyway, they have to break out. Were you like genuinely upset when we realized he couldn't swim? That was very sad.
I was kind of confused because can we still not try to get him out? Can we not have him drop down there and someone help? Maybe. I mean, that's probably too much to ask, but
crash course in floating.
You guys
just kick your legs a bit. I don't know.
Fitted on the plank at the end of Titanic.
I don't know. Just try something.
The plank didn't have buoyancy.
Actually, speaking of aliens, one of the only truly funny scenes in the whole thing, I think, is when Andor and his mate are running, having escaped, and then the two aliens are like, "Where are these fuckers going towards our landhopper?" And then they just pop the net.
They were outstanding. Yeah, they were just great.
And then they just have a good chuckle.
Well, we just give you guys a ride. We hate the Empire too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, what the fuck are you doing? Where do you think you're going? And then this net was like this cool plasticky net. They were just funny aliens. They were just funny looking. And I appreciate sometimes you just want a funny looking alien. It's been very stressful and Kino's just died. Sometimes I just want to see Andor running into a net.
The ship that he has there is like the quad ship or whatever. That's the same thing that's in Force Awakens, right? It's like the portion guy. I think that's his ship. But one of the aliens looked kind of like one of the people that was on Jakku, like the same species or something. So I thought that was interesting.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, maybe they just reused some props. I don't know. But anyway, it was a much needed pure comedy scene, and I was here for it. Okay, let's talk about Luthen meeting up with Saw Gerrera.
Saw mentions all the different rebel factions that are trying to go against the Empire.
I was very happy to see Saw Gerrera back again. I think he got a bit of a bad rap. Even fans of Rogue One sometimes don't like his character because it was hard to understand him and he was so messed up. But I was really pleased to see him because he's the only person who can be a foil to Luthen. If you think the whole point is that Luthen is already the kind of corrupted Jedi or whatever you want to call him, cynical and pragmatic. Well, the other characters are all slowly drifting that way, quite painfully in the case of Mon Mothma. But Saw's already there. Saw's already very pragmatic and cynical. So maybe it's the only conversation where you can truly see Luthen talk to a peer, maybe.
You can also see, and this is dipping into the last of the episodes a bit, but you can see why Saw becomes as paranoid as he does when you have a guy like Luthen in charge who is willing to sacrifice anyone at any moment. You can see why he would not be on board with the greater rebellion.
Yeah, the mind fuckery that goes on in that scene. Saw in Rogue One was very interesting, but anything we get from him kind of before that, I find interesting. I think there's room for him to appear more because it's how does he get from this kid, in Clone Wars to where we see him in Rogue One?
If you're the kind of person like me, who has seen Saw Gerrera appear in 18 different pieces of media, it's weird, putting together the pieces of the timeline because it's all over the place.
It's like a Picasso.
right, you're slowly piecing it all together, like his life story. It's kind of interesting.
There is a really good book that came out with Rogue One that was kind of the prequel for Jyn Erso and gives you it basically just gives you her childhood with Saw Gerrera and then why they fell out.
Yeah,
which
I've
is
read it.
really,
Catastrophe?
it's really good.
Catalyst is called it.
I mean, it's not that it's
Catalyst, yeah.
necessarily that well written, but it does give you this. You see a different side of him, like the father side, and you get some of that fleshing out of Jyn, which is really nice.
Yeah, like I really wanted Jyn to be more of a character than she was, because I do think she does connect a lot to what they ended up doing here with Cassian, where like she is like a person where she kind of like accepts that the world sucks and she like keeps her head down. Like there's a line in Rogue One about how like I'm fine as long as I don't look up, and she eventually like decides to look up essentially. But like I just like I thought there was a lot there that didn't have a chance to be explored. So like
yeah,
I hope for like a Jyn prequel or something.
I'm not sure they'll be able to get her back.
There
Yeah.
won't be, but yeah.
Yeah, I wish we'd had more time with her.
Anyway, it was good to get more time with Saw Gerrera. I like him, and I think again it's an interesting path. It's the path kind of almost to the dark side, like the idea that when you become as ideological and as hell bent on revenge, you sort of end up in the same place as your enemy, which Luthen's hinting at.
Just about your comment about the aliens, in the same Lothern Stones article that Gilroy mentioned young Stalin as an influence, he also said that he didn't want to include aliens until he'd figured out the political baggage that they carry and how that would affect the story.
Okay, well that shows intentionality and not lack of budget, so respect to that. Good intel. Okay, folks, on to episodes 7 to 9, which I've called not 7 to 9, 10. On to episodes 10 to 12, which I've called Ferrix Rises. So Kino, Loy, and Andor arrange the prison breakout. Sorry, I went a little bit ahead of myself there. Loy dies in the attempt. There's a hilarious alien interaction, which I much appreciated. Andor goes back to Ibiza to get his stuff and promises to expose the corrupt prison system. Mon Mothma resists the help of Davos Skulden in exchange for a betrothal to her daughter. Weirdly, though, the daughter seems to be getting into the Chaldean culture, which also seems to include arranged marriage and betrothal, and there's definite shades of Sansa going on there. Meanwhile, ISB officer Lonnie Young informs Luthen that the ISB knows about Spellhouse. They have a really long conversation about betrayal and what they're sacrificing for. It's a very weird relationship because it involves blackmail around his family. But I thought I would just read the Luthen speech written by Beau Willimon, who wrote parts of House of Cards for fans of House of Cards. This is what Luthen says. I am damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior from injustice without contemplating the cost. And by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of the enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. The ego that started this fight will never have a mirror, an audience, or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything, which is some pretty powerful speechifying there. Anyway, so they have their interaction. So at that point, Luthen knows that the ISB knows about Spellhouse, but sends people to die anyway. Saw Gerrera then comes around and says, hey, I'm happy to join the raid. And he's like, okay. Marva dies, and Miro hopes Andor will attend her funeral. Meanwhile, Luthen still wants Vel to kill him there. At the funeral, B2EMO plays a speech from Marva that inspires a rebellion on Ferrix. Andor escapes and makes sure Bix is safe with Brasso. Khan saves Miro. In the final scene, Andor and Luthen confront each other. Andor basically says, kill me or let me join you. We know what choice is going to be made. And then in the after credit sequence, we realize that the parts that the prisoners were making were parts for the Death Star. So a lot going on there. Where to begin? So we've done the prison breakout. Let's do Mon Mothma and Davos Skulden, because that's kind of quite standalone. What are your feelings on this, boys and girls?
I mean, I do like I was saying earlier. I do really appreciate the payoff that she is going to have to make this really difficult sacrifice, but she's kind of doesn't really have a lot of choices at this point, and it really shows like how far she's willing to go for this thing, which to me like gives so much to her character and to her being this like central figure to the rebellion, because like if she was just like this rich person funding everything without consequence, it wouldn't have the same weight to it.
Do you think the sacrifice is the daughter's betrothal? Because when she says to her cousin Val, I found a solution, we then have had the scene, or about to have the scene, where she's in the car with her husband, knowing she's been overheard, and basically says, oh, you've been gambling again. So I think she thinks her solution is to start to basically sacrifice her husband in order to save
for sure.
herself and her daughter, right? Like she doesn't think she's sacrificing the daughter.
Yeah, but the question, like for me, is like, so yeah, she is definitely throwing her husband under the bus, which I do also appreciate as like a moment of like political ruthlessness by her. But I think it almost feels kind of fucked up in the way she's doing it, where like she is going to blame him for the reason why she has to do this betrothal. Like it's not even, she's still going to go through with it, but she's just making it look like he's the one who caused it. Like it doesn't actually change the
I
choice.
thought there wasn't going to be a betrothal at all, because then she goes to the Imperial audit. They say, hey, you've got 400,000 credits missing. She's like, yeah, I had to, I'm really sorry, but my husband's got a major gambling problem. That's where the money went.
Yeah.
So she confesses to not having the money, but because of him.
Yeah, which could work. I don't know. I do think that extra layer still will play out in some fashion. But you're right that is definitely what she's trying to do at this.
And then I think what's going to happen is, for whatever reason, the daughter's going to want to marry Joffrey anyway and get her caught up with this mafia, because he knows she needs the money. Or maybe the husband isn't such an idiot as we all think, and he flips on her as well. I don't know. I think she's not yet at the point of making that final sacrifice, which is her daughter. I think that's going to be the big moral turning point, maybe in season 2. Like if everyone's on their journey, like the end of season 1 is Cassian making his commitment, and I guess the end of season, or maybe halfway through season 2, is her making her commitment. Because I still feel she feels she's got a way out.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think you have the right of that. I think it's just cool to see her maneuvering in this fashion. Like I actually forgot that she knew the driver was ISB, or an ISB informant. So like to see her like make that move and see it all play, I was like, oh shit, that is so brilliant the way she did this. So ruthless. But yeah, it's such a smart plan.
How about you all, Matt, Adam, Jock, anything on the Mon Mothma of it all?
No, she's
a little
fucking
confused
awesome
at first. But at first I thought it was obvious that she was going to have to sacrifice the daughter, but then we had that conversation in the... I thought that was her shifting, was like, well, no, I'm going to sacrifice my husband instead.
Yeah, because she doesn't love.
Yeah.
Not to with the betrothal, but I really enjoyed the scene where in the Imperial Senate where she was basically just shouting to deaf ears, and like the whole like difficulties of reform within a fascist system. Like we've recently seen the problems through.
Yeah, I did think that was a small bit that was particularly compelling, given the entirety of Star Wars, right? I mean, we get within the first half an hour, I think, of the first movie, they talk about how the Emperor's like, I just did away with the Senate. And you're like, what's that? And we know that she's still kind of working around at this point, but it's just like a sad shell. But I don't think it started that way immediately once Palpatine takes power. It's kind of this gradual thing.
I agree. Yeah, that was really sad. Really sad to see that holodeck system. It's what it must have been like in 1932 in the Weimar Republic, when you could just see the system decaying around you and couldn't really stop it from literally shouting into the void. So much politics in this. I do think it's significant that the final 3 episodes are written by Beau Willimon, and as much as I came to hate House of Cards, there are certain political aspects which I think are just so from him. Sorry, Matt?
So do we know why the senators weren't there on other worlds? Were the worlds like disappeared, or they disappeared, or do they just not believe in the Senate functioning anymore? Or...
I think they just don't turn up because it's pointless. Could be wrong.
That's actually what I thought. Too. Like they just weren't showing up for the meetings.
I assumed it was a combination of like worlds that refused to, toe the line, that, they probably were putting down little rebellions, right away, right? Who were like, I'm part of the Republic. People that left, people that had to be put down, and then people that were too afraid or that felt that the Senate's just pointless at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I always get the feeling of Coruscant as a sort of declining late Imperial Rome city that it's so corrupt and it's so vacuous, and it's just all a hollow shell. Okay, so then on to the final, Ferrix, right, which is really the location of a lot of this action with the death of Marva. Oh, it's very sad to see Timo, like, just being so sad about her going.
When is she gonna get back?
I know.
It's so sad.
Droid love. And the orchestration of this very beautifully rooted in, I was thinking a lot about Dr. Blood, Sarah Dr. Blood, and this idea of these sort of very rooted ethnographical, sort of the music and the ceremony of making the brick, just very beautiful and very well done. And this amazing speech that she gives, this posthumous speech, just very beautiful, using a good bit of Star Wars kind of mythos there, like these little holograms. I think are very cool, very part of the Star Wars world. What did you all think of this, the whole Ferrex's final denouement?
Oh, I love this funeral. I love this tradition that they have. Even it incorporates, advanced technology at this point. It's like the dead get their final say, like not just like the reading of the will to a couple people, like the whole, village shows up. The people that knew them show up, and they get to say, whatever it is they want to say, and everyone just listens.
I mean, it could go badly wrong, right? If you had a really petty bitch doing it.
Well, I bet it does sometimes.
There's probably been some tough funerals where they're just like, fuck you and fuck you.
And
I was sleeping with your husband and your husband.
And
oh
you,
my gosh.
Sackville Baggins, nicked my teaspoons 3 parties ago and didn't bring them back. I can imagine Bilbo doing an absolute doozy of his speech.
But I mean,
all these big emotional sequences. Yeah, I mean, to me, this last episode really like encapsulates what seems to make Tony Gilroy so good as a director, because you see it in episode 3, episode 6, episode 9, episode 12, where like you have these just huge set pieces where like so much is going on and there's like so many moving parts to them, and it just like you just feel this crescendo building with like music and the actual action happening and all that stuff, but like it all never feels like that confusing. Like you can really follow it, but at the same time, like it all just like it feels chaotic, but not in a way that you feel lost. It's great.
Yeah, what you said, I agree.
Yeah. I do think the one issue I had is like, at least in this last one, like I didn't really feel like every character had like a lot to do. Like Vel and Cinta are just kind of there and then they leave. Like I understand that they kind of changed their plan about killing Andor, just like didn't have the opportunity because of the way things played out. But yeah, like just like it felt like they had a lot of characters there that they didn't necessarily know what to do with. So
did you guys feel at one point that Val was going to kill Cintra, like when she was coming up behind her and she was on the binoculars?
No,
because she also knows Luthen's identity. I had this really sinister. There was a sinister moment where I was like, but maybe I'm just making that up. Yeah, I was very pleased when they left together.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I did like the whole like death as putting it through the lens of a community, and how like everyone said that everyone came out and the dead gets to talk and you get to listen, and then they become part of the town square or whatever.
Yeah, these are just things that haven't been in Star Wars, at least not in a while. Like just these like really feeling this sense of place. Like a lot of it's kind of vague, like, oh, we're on a desert planet and there's not a lot to it. It's so much stronger for me, and it changes so much about how I feel about the world. Like just having that attention to detail and that focus.
I feel like prior to this, we mostly just got it in certain episodes, like in the Clone Wars, on like alien planets, small tribes, villages, which worked really well. And now we sort of see like a kind of a mainline, society here, like in the middle of the Empire, kind of well trafficked. I mean, I guess it's not like it's not Coruscant or anything, but
Yeah, I just loved it. I loved every part.
And we're really connected to this place too, like we talked about at the beginning. We're like we spent a lot of time here. Like they really made sure that we spent time in this place. We were not just hopping around planets constantly. Like this is the home for this show. And that's a big reason why this lands so well. And of course, you mentioned like the practical setting aspect of it too, Bina. Like that really helps a lot too. Like even like the dude who bangs the thing for the time guy, like the payoff of that was really cool. Like we spent a lot of time with him. We got to see him kick a stormtrooper off the thing.
I love it. I mean, I was thinking a lot of that in a sense you had, like, the more I think about it, the more I think you do need to root it in a real place, because so much of Star Wars is abstract, especially when it's with the Skywalkers, because it's about a certain person who's been chosen with a certain mission and who in the abstract is going to do this amazing thing that helps all these other little people around everywhere. But we never really see those people. Maybe the closest we get to, honestly, is the Ewoks. Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like it makes sense to actually see real people, and maybe it helps not having aliens. It helps just seeing people slowly oppressed and then have the courage to come together, that this is there. As much as it's kind of, it's Andor's story, It's not, right. Like Andor is also his mum. It's Marva Andor, and it's the story of her inspiring her townsfolk to rebellion. Like totally, that was my big revelation in my rewatch, that maybe the Andor of the title, or in my head canon, the Andor of the title is actually Marva, and it's her story about making ordinary people realize that they need to stand up. And that's how
I think I like that better than being Cassian.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too how it also kind of jives with the sort of art from adversity element of the original Star Wars, where like it was a really difficult thing to make, but in some ways that actually made it better. Because I remember Tony Gilroy talking about how there was a lot of effort put into making Ferrix, like it was really difficult, so they felt like they needed to use it a lot. Which it's interesting, like how that kind of like actually makes it a better story. The thought process was like, yeah, like we really need to use this place, and it actually like ends up being a really important part of what makes the show good.
Yeah, and also like I was reading another interview with Tony Gilroy, who was talking about how when he started it off, he was like, how does this guy, we know he's going to kill himself effectively at the end of the movie. So how do you get to that point? Well, it's only a sacrifice if you think he's not already dead. So a lot of the characters in this season, what they talk about is like when Marva gives her big speech to him that I'm not going to leave, I'm old, I've got nothing to lose. I'm basically already dead, so I've got nothing to lose. I'm just going to be in the rebellion now. And I think if you approach a lot of the characters through that lens, like in a sense, Luthen 15 years ago, whenever what happened, whether it was Jedi related or not, deciding that under fascism, he's already dead. Like at some point, the unfair arm of justice will put you in a prison and never come out. It's the realization that Kino comes to. Like if he's already dead, does it matter that he can't swim? So I don't know. I feel this is like a really profoundly good piece of TV. That's all I have to say. But also a depressing one in a way.
For sure. Do we want to talk a bit about like what we think is going to happen next? Like I think that'll be interesting with respect to that, because like can it keep that momentum if we move away from Ferrix? Can it keep that sense of quality? Like if we let go of a lot of these things that we loved about it, like I don't know, it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
I think the Mon Mothma story has to come to the fore because she's the one who hasn't yet moved to her central role in the rebellion, and I think sadly it's got to involve her losing her daughter in some way, whether the daughter dies or she's estranged from her daughter, because otherwise she has something to lose, which is her daughter. If what we're positing here is that to lead or to be in the rebellion involves giving up everything else, then you've got to have given up everything, and she still has something to give up. Everyone else has lost everything. So
I'm on the show's Wikipedia, and about Mon Mothma, it says Gilroy felt Star Wars fans would see Mothma in a new light after watching the series, and add that there are key characters and events in the series that would be different or, quote, more interesting than fans previously realized. Quote, what you've been told, what's on Wikipedia, is really all wrong. So that's going to be...
Love that.
Well, we know that many Bothans didn't die for this information, so
Well, that was Death Star 2 plans.
That was the second Death Star. Yeah, lots of Bothans.
Maybe we're going to get a prequel with a bunch of Bothans, and that's where all the alien budget went.
Bothan infiltration mission. Yep.
Rogue Bothan.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Do you think there'll be a big revelation about the reality of Luthen, whether he's a Jedi?
Possibly. I think for me, the big question is like a lot of time has to pass before we get to Rogue One. Like I think we need like 4 years to pass or something. So like how are they going to structure that from a pacing point of view if we're only having one more season? Like it could be a very fast paced thing compared to what we have here. So I'm curious.
One year per 3 episodes? I don't know. Or maybe they just do a time.
Yeah, they'll probably do
I think they'll probably do a time jump.
Yeah. I mean, we got to have a little training montage for Andor, right? That could be like a few years ahead. And we show some of the shit he did to become, this like, rebel commando.
Yeah, like for me, the tricky thing is his character arc feels complete, at least going into Rogue One. So like, I don't know. I guess there's stuff to do with
it's just what hijinks he's going to get up into.
Yeah, like I'm curious. I'm really curious to see how they do it. Like I just can't see the path.
At some point, Luthen has to die.
Yeah, probably.
And Saw Gerrera become way more fucked up and cynical. So I think there's got to be a big there's got to be a big Saw Luthen fallout, and Luthen has to end up dead, and Mon Mothma has to probably lose her daughter in some way and get kicked out of the Senate, be found out, be on the run. To be full rebel,
right? She has to she has to be on the lam at that point.
Yeah, she has to be exposed to be on the run.
Let's get some Yavin 4 action in.
I mean, like
Bell has to be killed. I mean, there's basically
Jimmy Smith's back in there a little bit.
Anyone you has to be gone, right? Anyone who's not in New Hope has to go.
Unless like
these people
Luthen
could
has
be
been the
off doing other
shadow
things.
figure the entire time, and we just never saw him. Like they show like he was behind everything the whole time he was alive. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, do you guys think we'll see Barristan?
Maybe. I'm also thinking, I guess like it makes sense. We need to kind of see how Andor goes from like earnest Nemec mode here to like cynical, like I will kill anyone ruthlessly mode he goes to in Rogue One. So that'll be interesting to see like all the fucked up shit.
Yeah, I'm
the
sure
same-
Luthien deals with that.
Yeah, it's the less extreme version of the Saw Gerrera slide, right?
Because he's really ruthless in Rogue One for sure. So like, how do we get that to that? I mean, he kills people pretty indiscriminately here. But...
Come Rogue One, it's just like I've lost too many people, I've killed too many people, like I don't care anymore.
Yeah. So we think people like Bix and Brasso and all of them are going to be relevant still, or are they just kind of packed off?
Nah, I think they go. I think they go. I think you get new cast
Oh, you
members.
think they go?
Yeah,
No,
I think you've got to very quickly move Andor and Saw to a much darker place. You've got to kill Luthen and you've got to get Mon Mothma on the lam. There's a lot to do in one season, which is why I'm a bit worried. The idea that this is going to be 5 seasons now compressed to just one more feels ambitious, you know?
But they're also not doing like these 5, 6, 8 episode seasons that most of these shows have done. They say we have 15 episodes for the next season. You go, well, that's probably enough time.
I'll be honest. I think this show has not performed that well compared to other Star Wars things, at least thus far. I think the word of mouth will help it, but I'm slightly worried that like Bob Iger is going to fly in and be like, nope, that's not working.
What? But no.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of Star Wars TV shows for the streaming channel was Bob Iger, so I don't see why. I mean, the best thing that can happen is Kathleen Kennedy's contract is almost up, and she'll just be out of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Oh, is she coming up to the end?
Bob Iger has come in because as much as Disney Plus has been a success on memberships, it is hemorrhaging money and they're going to a recession. So,
right, is he going to start cutting shit? I don't know. Like, I mean, I think
everyone
it'll be
is
fine
right now. I mean, so it's a little troubling for something like this, but we'll see. There are shows that have been renewed that said, you know what? Actually, we're just never mind.
I do think they recognize that they would recognize the value of like a critical darling show, at least like a show that
Emmys. We need this to get Emmys if we want it to continue, because it's interesting, isn't it? Disney Plus has never played the Emmy game because it's genre TV, that dirty of dirty words, but so was Game of Thrones in fairness. But it still doesn't dominate in the way that HBO, Netflix, and Apple do. Well, not that Apple does really. But I suppose Ted Lasso, that's Apple, isn't it? So I think he would want that. And I do wonder if this is one of those shows that's going to get better and better on reruns, a bit like The Wire. So it lives forever on streaming and word of mouth. I gave up on it and did not watch it for a good 6 weeks until you guys started talking about it.
And I think a lot of people were like, even me, like it took me a while to watch it. I think a lot of people experienced that because it takes a while to get going. And that
I don't think that's uncommon at all.
Yeah. And it doesn't have like a big character like Obi-Wan or whatever where you're like, oh, hell yeah, let's watch
plushie toy. It doesn't have a baby Yoda, you know?
Yeah.
There's nothing marketable. I mean, it's also like thinking, what is the Disney World ride I can create from this? What is the plushie toy? What is the animated kids
you have to
go into the prison and you have to make Death Star.
You have to find a way out.
You have to find the one way out.
It's a
so many Luthen wigs.
Spoilers.
A Luthen artifact store at Disney.
Now that's something they could do. Oh man, I do think that it's I don't know, that is the trouble here. I do think more people are picking it up, but I mean I know people. I have like people I work with that are like older people that are like, oh yeah, I got Disney Plus because man I loved Obi-Wan as a kid, so they wanted to watch Obi-Wan, right? And then they were kind of like, wait, what's going on?
I don't think it helped that Obi-Wan was the lead in and Obi-Wan wasn't as good. So I don't think that helped. And
so some people were checked out of this. Boba Fett kind of wasn't as, let people. Those are like your two big names, and they were both a bit of a letdown. I actually enjoyed Obi-Wan. There were parts of it, obviously, I didn't. But I think that a lot of people they watched an episode or two of this and were like, I don't know what it is, and they just they haven't come back.
I think
the ones
this
that
would have
because they're talking to people.
Big time from being bingeable. I reckon if they had just put the whole lot on and allowed people to get to the good stuff over a weekend, it might have survived better.
Because your word of
then it's
mouth
like-
would have been immediate.
Yeah, but then it's like, yeah, exactly, because immediately people would have said, just hold on, wait till episode 4 or whatever it was.
Right, because someone like me was like, I watched those first 3 episodes and I was like, oh, this is interesting, and I was like, I'm really interested to see where it's going, and these people would ask me like, at work or wherever, like, whoa, what? I'm like, I don't know, man, I wasn't even into this show, but I'll see. And then there were 1 or 2 people that are like, oh, hey, did you see the prison? What's going to happen? That we'd talk about it. But most people were like, oh yeah, I forgot about that show, 2 months ago.
Yeah, but I feel this is The Wire. It's going to get better with age.
I feel like that a lot of people just kind of written it off because Disney Plus was just putting out so much content between Marvel and like their normal stuff and, now Star Wars. And it's just like, after Book of Boba Fett, it was like, whew, that was bad. It was
this wasn't even the only Star Wars thing they put out,
right?
right? They put out the Tales of the Jedi thing at the same time as this was airing, right?
Yeah, which is nuts.
I haven't seen that yet, but
yeah,
it's not bad. It's really short. They're like 15 minutes long, each of them.
Oh, okay. I know. I mean, because I liked the Visions. That was interesting, but I just haven't gotten around to watching I watched the first one, Ahsoka, whatever it was. I thought it was all right,
Well,
but then I just haven't come back.
Ahsoka's going to have her own live action coming out pretty soon too, right?
Yeah, I think next year.
Next year, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it'll be Mando and then that for our next Star Wars thing.
Yeah, which I think people are into. So.
Well, the way Mandalorian ended was just give me more Mandalorian as soon as possible.
Right, and we got Mandalorian. We got the best part of Boba Fett.
The smuggled in Mandalorian.
Little extra Mandalorian.
Yeah.
I'm still unsure about where that's going, but we'll talk about that at a later date.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. So,
That
just
deserves its own
reconvene.
podcast.
Well, listener, we hope you enjoyed Andor as much as we did, and we will no doubt be back if Bob Iger lets us have season 2. Then we will be back to discuss that and see who is or isn't a Jedi. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this little flash VOC. Much
Thank you,
appreciated.
Bina. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bina.
It was fun to talk to you. I haven't
Thanks,
spoken to you
Bina.
in a while, so it's good that we came together under the aegis of the wondrous Star Wars. It just like Star Wars to me is like Shakespeare, right? Like Shakespeare, you can do modern versions, Tudor versions, space version. You can it's so good that it kind of like the better the quality of the writing, the more in a way you can play with it. And I feel this world, this universe of Star Wars is so amazing because you can have westerns, spare westerns like Mando, and you can have kids anime, and you can have stuff like this. So it just
and I
renews.
think the only thing you can't do is try to say what Star Wars is, sort of. I posted a meme the other day that was like someone, was like, I'm going to figure out which Star Wars I like. And it was like, Chadwick Boseman and Black Panther being like, we don't do that around here. Like it's like we just take it all and you like your thing. It's fine, guys. Like it's all kinds of stuff. And I think it's better for it. And even when it misfires, someone's going to be really into that.
Yeah. And someone's going to make some amazing fanfic about that thing we didn't get. And then 10 years time, there's going to be an amazing series we love on the back of that kernel of an idea.
Because
isn't Michal actually writing Obi-Wan fanfic book?
It's
yeah,
great.
Mikal's going to save Obi-Wan with her amazing writing. She's way too modest. I
It'll be
know.
fun.
I know.
But I just love that it can be, like swords and sorcery and, the magic wizard with the light sword. And it can be like these quiet, slow character studies. And it can be, it's got a wide range.
Right. When I was a kid, when I fell in love with it at the age of 6 in the cinema, it was with that very simplistic good and bad and guys with magic swords. And that's what I wanted. And now I'm older and I have this and it's amazing. It's just amazing to me, this amazing world. So I know it's hard. We can often be down on George Lucas and I'm often down on George Lucas, but he gave us this amazing sandpit to play in. So that's awesome.
Yeah, but we all hate sand.
It gets everywhere.
Handshot first. All right. See you guys. Have a great weekend.